Okay, guys, this is Emily Muccianti, and I'm here with a very special guest. I have Dr. Stephanie Stollar, who is with the University or Mount St. Joseph's College or University?
University now. Yeah.
Okay, in Cincinnati, Ohio. And she has graced us with her presence so that we can ask some questions about the science of reading. Because really, Stephanie, this is your thing. Um, I met Dr. Stoller at an Acadians training where you were presenting with Susan Hall, and it was amazing. And now Dr. Hall's book is going to be our book club, so I'm happy about that. So, what I really wanted to do, though, is introduce my audiences to the science of reading and its importance. And so, we're going to just start right there and let you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with you and with the folks that you interact with. So I started my career as a school psychologist. I worked in a Head Start and a couple of different Head Start programs and in a K-8 elementary school. And that's really where I had some very formative experiences. That's where I realized the power of prevention and early intervention, what can happen in pre-K, how powerful that time period is to impact student outcomes. And I had the very frustrating experience of waiting to fail in my K-8 elementary, where the only way you could get help was special ed. And if you weren't eligible for special ed, sorry for your luck. And so I had this like cognitive dissonance where I could see the power of prevention on the one hand, and on the other hand, it was not happening in the public school. And that's when I really started focusing on reading. And way back then, started learning more about assessment, direct assessment of reading skills. And that really shaped the rest of my career. That ignited my passion for prevention of reading failure, for early intervention. And when I finished my doctorate, I went and worked as a professor in a school psychology program at the University of South Florida, which was a fantastic experience, but I decided that wasn't for me. And I moved back to Ohio and worked for a regional resource center where we were supporting districts around Cincinnati to implement a problem-solving model, what now people would think of as MTSS. It was a tiered system of support, and loved that job. It was just really the most collaborative experience of my career. That agency that I worked for was dissolved, and when I decided to leave there, I went to work for the authors of Acadians, what then was called Dibbles. Mm-hmm. And I worked virtually or remotely for them for about 12 years. And I left Acadians in March of 2000, right? When the pandemic.
Right when it hit. Oh, gosh. And then what do we do now? Okay.
Interesting timing. Yeah. So I had been an adjunct for about 5 years at Mount St. Joe. They have an online reading science program. I was working with their master's level students, and I decided to take a half-time assistant professor job with them. We have since started an online doctoral program, so that's been really exciting for me to be a part of, the beginning of that doctoral program. And then I also have been doing some consulting on my own with school districts, with departments of ed, and I started an online community, a membership called the Reading Science Academy. And that has been absolutely joyful for me.
Which I am a member of. And
yes.
So excited. And another reason I hope our audience stays tuned so that we can talk about what you offer in that membership, because it's amazing.
Well, thank you for that. I am having an amazing experience being connected to educators like you. It's so inspirational to me, especially during the pandemic, to see what teachers are taking on their own, their own learning. The people in the graduate program, that's a different kind of thing. Like you have a goal, you're going to get a graduate degree. and that's a fantastic undertaking on its own. But what people are doing on their own time, where they're not getting any credits, they're not, working towards a degree, it's just really, it makes me feel very optimistic about the future of education to get to experience that alongside so many educators. So I've
Yes.
really enjoyed it.
Good. And I will say that through my own work with these teachers, new teachers, intervention teachers, gosh, they're knocking themselves out trying to find a way. The heart, well,
Yeah.
the heart of a teacher is a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And all we want is to do right by our students. So
That's right.
and what you're providing is giving them the tools to do that as well. So I'm really impressed with that. Now, so why would you say, let's talk about the science of reading a little bit. Can you give us kind of a general overview of what that term means? It's kind of the new buzzword that's coming in, but it's not really new. And
Right.
if you could kind of bridge that for us.
Yeah, so the science of reading is just a phrase that people are using now to talk about the research that can inform reading instruction, reading intervention, the systems of support around reading in a school. So it's a body of evidence. It's a specific type of research. And it's the kind of research that has been done to allow us to make conclusions about X causing Y. And so it's very practical. The way I think about it is very practical because teachers have a lot of choices and decisions to make, a lot of demands on their time, and they need to know what's the fastest, most effective way for me to get the outcomes I want for my student. Every teacher wants the best for their students, and they work hard, they spend a lot of time, they spend their own time and money, but they don't always get the results that they want. So for me, the science of reading is that collection of evidence that teachers can look to, not to tell them exactly how to make every move in the classroom, but to give them a really good foundation of these things are going to get you where you want to be with your students. These other things really don't have any evidence that they work, so don't spend your time on those. So that's kind of the way I think about the science of reading. It is a phrase that people are using now. 20 years ago, we used to call it scientifically based reading research, or SBRR, right around the turn of the century. And what's sort of, I guess, put me on this mission is that when I went to graduate school, even another couple of decades prior to that, I learned all about all of this. I learned about what we know in the research community about how kids learn to read, about why some students struggle with reading, about how to intervene when there are reading problems, how to prevent reading problems from happening in the first place. I learned all of that. And when I started working in schools, I couldn't figure out, why do I know all of this? And nobody else around me knows all of this. None of the teachers, none of the administrators had that same knowledge base or that same frame of reference to guide what they were doing in schools. And that always puzzled me. And that's really what's driven me to connect with educators in all the ways that I have across my career, is to transmit that information so that people can be more effective and more efficient.
Well, and that's what I really appreciate about your membership is the body of research that you disseminate into a way that is digestible for those of us that don't have PhDs and don't have, that reference point. And so for me, it's very, very helpful, but leads me to a question and a frustration, because you work with new teachers. I work with many new pre-certified teachers that are, in the program. And I am so frustrated that the colleges haven't caught up with what seems to be needed in the classroom, especially in regards to the science of reading. We still see very old practices, very much balanced literacy instruction, rather than getting into some cold, hard, things that they need to do. Can you address that at all? Where are we moving to?
Well, this is what has me most excited right now, is I actually finally see some movement. I lived through the reading first days, right, where there was federal pressure on higher ed to change. And I conducted a lot of trainings all around the country during that era. And the university faculty would sit like this, like, or they would turn around, like open up their newspaper in front of, like, the most
Wow.
rude behavior that you could imagine. They were impervious to it. They were not going to buy in. And, the reasons for that are complicated. It goes back to, I think, the reading wars, the beliefs that people have. It's related to how university professors are protected by tenure, that what they teach in their classes is pretty much their domain. And, outside of accreditation, nobody can really touch that. And then those systems around the university don't help. So the accreditation process, the teacher licensing exams, what happens at the State Department of Education, all of those systems are out of whack, and none of them are lined up to get this research-based information in the hands of teachers. So if an individual professor has beliefs about how reading happens or how reading instruction should happen that aren't lined up with the science, they can perpetuate that. I know in my work at Mount St. Joe, many teachers, even very veteran teachers, are very upset when they find out about this body of research evidence, because they feel like it was withheld from them, and it was. In some cases, what they were told by their beloved professors was the opposite, right? Like exactly what not to do to teach reading or to intervene with reading. And so it's a system that has really resisted influence and change very strenuously. And it's been the reason why districts have to retrain their teachers through professional development. And that is extremely slow and inefficient and hard to do and tough on teachers, right? Like, you're trying to do your job while you're trying to learn how to do your job.
Right.
It's been a disaster. So I finally feel hopeful that there's a grassroots movement. So this is what I'm excited about, because teachers have started their own grassroots movement. They're seeking out information about the science of reading. The parents are conducting their own advocacy efforts, grassroots, community to community. And now I'm seeing that within university faculty, that it's not coming from outside, but individual people are reaching out to learn, and they're making tremendous improvements in their coursework. And a lot of times they'll be really reluctant because they're the only person. It's just like what's going on in schools. They're the only person in their setting who has heard about the science of reading or wants to learn about it. So they're kind of conducting a covert operation, like on my own, I'm going to learn about it, but I'm not going to tell anybody else I'm learning about it.
Right. Well, and the science of reading is really about a systematic, direct approach to instruction. When we're looking at the application of the science of reading in the classroom, outside of the body of evidence is telling us how to instruct and what we need to teach for reading. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really about that explicit, direct instruction where we're delivering new information in from the simple to the complex, so that kids can move, right?
Yes. It's absolutely based on improving outcomes. It's about equity, frankly. It's about getting all students to be readers, which is what changes lives and opens doors. Absolutely. It's what most of us went into education for, is because we see that as the path to a better future for all students. So I think about sort of 4 areas or components of the science of reading. And this is just me needing to take a lot of complexity and reduce it so I can get my own head around it.
I appreciate that.
But if you asked, actual researchers or cognitive scientists, they would give you a much different definition. But I think about 4 areas. So the science of reading is about how the brain learns to read. And this is where we have really new information, because we can scan brains now that 20 years ago, we just didn't have that information. So we know a lot about the pathway that has to be built in students' brains, that doesn't happen naturally, that what you teach and how you teach can actually create that pathway for students. So it's about how the brain learns to read. It's about what to teach. So the science of reading tells us what are the skills that students have to acquire to build that reading brain. And then it's what you were saying, the how to teach. So explicit, direct, systematic instruction. And then the fourth sort of component for me is the matching of student needs, the data piece, to the instruction or intervention, and building a system, a three-tiered model. So I'm doing my triangle. A three-tiered model.
You're speaking my language. These are all the things, yes.
Yep. That will get all students to those grade level expectations with the least amount of resources possible. So matching student needs from their assessment data to the right kind of instruction or intervention. So the how and the what we teach, the how we teach it, and then these systems of support, the structures and systems that we can put in place to make sure it actually happens.
Right.
Because we don't want the science of reading to become this laundry list. You know, I hear teachers, well, is this the science of reading? Is that the science of reading? What does the science of reading say about? And what I want people to think about is there are effective practices that research shows work better than others. But you have to be thoughtful about, what does this student need? What does this grade level need? What does our school need? And there's an art and a science both in matching those things together. So,
and we know from an intervention standpoint, the absolute necessity of assessment.
Yes.
The data has to drive our instruction.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you pointed out there all too often schools want to have intervention programs, so they hire an intervention person, and then they start focusing on, well, this lesson, and skip the most vital component, which is the data. And so I know how valuable that is, but I really like what you said about the other systems in place to deliver this information. And that kind of leads right into the spring book club that we're going to do with my Reading Lab SOS group, because that's exactly what we're going to look at, is how that will apply into the system. So thank you for saying that. Now, with that being said, what do we do? And this was a question from one of my members. What do we do if we're in a position as interventionists, we're teacher leaders, change makers, whatever you want to call us, and we know that we have to disseminate some of this information to those that may be resistant in the classroom? Where is a good starting point? How can we help to bridge that chasm that exists?
That's a really, really good question. And first of all, I love that the interventionists want to spread that around and want to share it, right? That's what happens. People get on fire. They start learning about this and they want to share it to everybody. And I have a little bit of a caution about that, because not everybody's going to be as enthusiastic as you are, or at the moment that, you are. And that can turn people off. So two things I would suggest as advice. Is, first of all, lead by example. So the best way to share effective practices, especially with people who are resistant, is to get good outcomes with students. Because this is what happens in schools, right? It's like wildfire that, spreads around. Like, well, what'd she do? Or what are you doing? Or how'd you do that? So much more than watching a webinar, going to a training, taking a course, right? It's like word of mouth. So take advantage of that culture. Demonstrate. So lead by example, demonstrate how to get better outcomes with students, and talk about it. Don't talk about it as you should, or you ought to, or why aren't you? But talk about it. This is what happened for me. I used to do XYZ. when I started doing A, B, and C, I saw a real change in my students. Look at this graph. You can't believe, watch this kid read, like share the outcomes of the students. And the second thing I would say is focus on the why more than the what, or at least the why before the what. When we go in, like a bull in a china shop, like you need to do this and that and change this. And because we're excited, we get passionate and we want to be helpful. And what we're sharing is probably helpful. But when people are not with you, the immediate human response to all that enthusiasm is change. Like, whoa, you want me to change? No. That's just a human reaction.
Well, and the reaction I always hear is, well, the pendulum's shifting again. I've seen it shift and it's going to shift back. And so it just kind of, I guess, is a way to get off the hook for some. And I've always felt like we can't change everybody, but that's the ones that we can. And I really like what you're saying, that it's about showing the successes, sharing what we can do with kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you said is so important. Start with the willing.
Yes.
Don't expect that you're going to change hearts and minds of, your entire staff, but find the ones who are interested in what you're talking about and have conversations with them. Read something, watch something, and then would you talk with me about this? I think that's how it grows.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, I'm thinking also about the publishers here. The publishers have such a powerful hold on what is actually delivered in the classroom. And I'm hearing my mother's voice in my head, follow the money, as one of the reasons why perhaps this is being kind of slow to roll out. There's a lot of money in these published curricula that is out there, our Fontes and Pinnells and our Lucy Calkins and those kinds of things that are not necessarily science of reading aligned and follow those that thinking. Right. So with that, for a teacher that is looking for things, what kind of resources are out there? Are there certain curricula that we could look at, certain publishers that are maybe more aligned than not? What would you say to that?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say that this is a relationship. Those publishers wouldn't be making gajillions of dollars if there weren't administrators deciding to buy their stuff.
Right.
So this is a two-way street. It's an interactive system, right?
Oh, yeah.
So administrators don't know any better because they weren't trained to know what's most effective curriculum. And so they buy what their neighbors, the neighboring district has bought, or what gives a glitzy sales presentation. So I guess there's lots of blame to go around. It's just more complex than just the nasty publishers. But there are also publishing companies out there who have always been grounded in research. And I would call out Voyager Sopris Learning.
One of my favorites.
As long as I've been an educator, they have been rooted in the reading science.
Right.
So
they were also partnered with Acadians, correct?
Yes, they are
time.
Publishing the Acadians assessments. Yep.
Yes.
I trust their products. There are some others that I would look to on a short list. I really like the instructional materials from Readsters, Linda Farrell's company. Obviously, the 95% group materials are top notch, in my opinion. Not just the structure of their intervention materials and now their core phonics supplement, but I've seen it in action. I've seen the results that those materials get. And there are certainly others. But I think what teachers have to educate themselves about is what to look for. And that's harder than just tell me which program to buy.
Right.
So they have to become educated on what to look for, but then they have to also know how to match the needs of the students to the program, because there are some very effective programs that aren't going to work for every individual student. So I wish it was easier. I wish it was just a menu of, choose this one. But it's more complex because we're dealing with little humans.
Right.
As far as resources, the Reading League has a curriculum review tool that you can download for free. I would encourage people to look at that.
And I'm going to put these links in the show notes so that people can just click
Yep,
some of
that's
these
a
things
good
that we're
one.
mentioning. Yeah, I love the Reading League too.
And the Colorado Department of Education has published a list of approved, maybe they don't call them approved, a list of core programs, supplemental programs, and intervention programs that
Good.
have gone through an extensive review. I wrote the rubrics for doing that review. It's not perfect. The list isn't perfect. There are things on there I wish weren't on there. Probably people at the Department of Ed wish some of those things on there hadn't made the list. But it's the most extensive review that I know of. So it's a starting place.
Okay.
People can download the rubric and use them themselves. They can look at the list of approved programs. There's a list, and I'll send you this link because it's not as readily accessible. There's a list of the reviews of the programs that didn't make the approved list, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
To see, the units of study and those kinds of things that didn't make Colorado's list. And you can see the reviewer notes. You can see the actual rubric from the review team.
Okay.
So those resources are really helpful for individual interventionists that are looking for materials or for whole school teams that are looking to adopt materials.
Perfect. That's a great list. And again, we'll put those links down below. So, okay, you've given us kind of an idea, foundation of the science of reading, how it applies to where we are, especially in intervention. And I think really, hopefully, our new teachers will take on this role of, sadly, their coursework didn't give it to them, so they're going to have to search it out for themselves. So let's talk about your membership. Tell us a little bit about this, because I know I love it, but I'm on the inside.
Yeah. So it's called the Reading Science Academy. And I designed it for people who are new to learning about the science of reading and people who don't have support. So they're not in a master's program. They're not taking letters training. They're not in a district that's moving in this direction, possibly. And for people who want information from a trusted source served up to them in response to what they need in the moment in a way that's manageable. Because teachers don't have time. They're not going to read the research on their own. I don't even think they necessarily should spend their time that way. But there's so much on the internet right now, and a lot of it can't be trusted. It's not, it's going to take people down the wrong path. So I created this online community to bring together people who want to learn together and want information, at their fingertips. So the way that it's structured is the members tell me what they're interested in learning about. And every week there's new material that is available, and you can consume as much or as little of that as you want to or need to. It's all housed in the password protected website all the way back to June of 2020. So when you become a member, you get this fantastic library of resources. So the first week of the month, we do this, like a live Q&A, and people can just ask random questions and we, have a discussion. The second week of the month, I do a recorded webinar on a topic that people have said that they're interested in or have questions about. So I do all the legwork. You just, get the information. The third week of the month, I do an implementation tool, some type of a document that helps people translate the research into their practice. And the fourth week of the month, we have a guest. So one of the things that I can do, because I've been in education for so long, is I know a lot of people, and I can bring all of those people to the members, which is a treat for me because these are fantastic researchers and educators. So Susan Hall has talked to our group. We've had Linda Farrell, we've had Deb Glazer, we've had, I'm not going to be able to remember them. Nancy Hennessy is talking with us next week. So we've had a variety of different people who are the real experts in education and in educational research. And we get to pick their brains. We get to ask specific questions. They're right here for us to access. So an interesting thing about the membership that was unexpected, as I said, I designed it for people who are early in learning about the science of reading, but that's not who's joined exclusively. So people who are quite experienced, like yourself, we have quite a few people who know a lot about reading research, who have been in education for a long time. And that's created a really nice community because it's not all people who are starting out. We can take advantage of all of that wealth of information. And it's a really supportive environment for sharing. Sometimes on Facebook and some of those big Facebook groups, people will put out, a real sincere question, and either they get wrong information or they get kind of criticized. And, that's painful to watch. I hate to see that. So in the Reading Science Academy, we really support each other to learn. There's no dumb questions, and we're not critical of people who are just starting on this journey. Actually, we're cheerleaders for people who are starting on this journey.
Yeah, so. It is a very safe place is what I've noticed. And because of the variety of experience within the members, you do have a number of just mentors. Yes. That are there. And I was able to sit in on the webinar with Dr. Clemens, who was kind of deconstructing his latest research about phonemic awareness. And I was just fascinated. I was quiet. I didn't even turn my camera on. I was just like, I can't believe I'm sitting here listening to this. This is super cool. And so I look forward to those things because you've traveled all over the country. You know so many people, and that's a big deal to, those, all of us nerds out there that just love reading instruction, because that's what we really are, is a bunch of little reading nerds.
Yeah, word nerds.
Yeah, word nerds.
We own it.
Yes, exactly. It's a badge of honor, I suppose. So, and what I want to say about it is it's so affordable. Teachers you're opening membership coming up at the end of January, correct? Yes. January 31st?
31st, yes.
Okay. And I believe the monthly fee is $15 a month?
$14.99 a month. Or if you want to save the cost of 2 months, you can do an annual membership for $149.
Right. And so for the cost of either no more than $15 a month, even less, the amount of information that you get, and I will say this because I shoot questions to you all the time, and you're so accessible to your members whenever I'm struggling with something, so that is an added benefit as well. And we will put the link down below so that if anybody is interested, I highly recommend it, and hope that we can just grow that membership to, I really want to see my new teachers go in. Like, I want to see all of my kids that I've been helping with the RECA in California move in and not have to unlearn so many things. Like, the RECA has set a standard. Let's keep it going.
Yeah. And support them to get it right from the get-go.
Absolutely.
One of the things that happens when you're a new teacher is you can get swallowed up by the culture. Like, whatever's happening in your school, whatever's happening in the classroom next door, it's just really easy to fall into that. And that's very understandable. But if you have access to another community of people who can show you that there's another way and kind of nurture you along that path, they don't have to be right next door in the next classroom. They can be all around the world. Actually, our members are all around the world, but still be that accessible to you and provide that kind of ongoing support so that you have a good, successful experience when you start out as a teacher, because that's a stressful time. Right. And the more support you can get in those early years, the better.
Right. And everybody is there really to either just improve their own outcomes for their students or to help others.
Yes.
There's no, nobody's trying to one up anybody. It's just,
that's right.
We're doing this for the betterment of our students around the world. And
that's right.
We know that if we can make them literate, the rest
all the doors open.
All of the doors. So I'm excited about that. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being here with us.
It's been my
And
pleasure.
yes, you and again, we'll have to do it again because I'm sure we're going to have some feedback. And
If you
look
get
forward.
questions, feel free to,
Yeah, how can they reach you? What's your best way to be in touch with you?
so my website is readingscienceacademy.com. I have a blog there. I should mention that I have a lot of free resources that people can download. If you scroll to the very bottom of the page, um, there's a separate page with a lot of free resources. Um, an introduction to the science of reading presentation with handouts and talking points and discussion guide. So anybody can use that and anything else that's on that free download page. I'm on social media reluctantly and what's the word I want to say? Embarrassingly, maybe sometimes because I don't know what I'm doing mostly.
You and me both.
I'm out there. Just started Instagram, so people can find me there. And then my email address is stephaniestollar@gmail.com, and people are welcome to contact me if they have questions.
Awesome. And I will put all of that in the links below so that they can reach you. Again, I can't thank you enough for spending this time with us.
It's been a pleasure.
It's just going to be awesome, and we'll see what we can get and help everybody do better, right? When you know better, you do better, and that's part of our goal here.
All right. It's all about.
That's right. Thank you again, Stephanie.